Welcome everyone to the webinar. It's great to have you all here. Today we're going to start with just going over Litmaps because our audience today, there's a mixture of undergraduate students, a lot of graduate students, some professors, academics, as well as professional researchers. So you might all be coming from slightly different angles of how you do research or how much you might know about Litmaps already. So I'm just going to cover all these topics as well to make sure we have a really well-rounded understanding of not just the literature review process, but how Litmaps fits into that. That's the goal for today. So we're going to start by going over Litmaps in a little bit of detail, like what is the tool in case you're here and you have never used the tool before. That's great. This is a wonderful introduction to that. Then we're going to dive into just the top level literature review. What's the core strategy or the core methods that we want to acknowledge, and how does Litmaps fit into those steps? And then we'll just dive into a couple other promotions and some information about other resources, and then go over questions. So if you haven't used the tool, Litmaps is an online freemium tool. That means we have both a free version, a paid version, team licenses, institutional licenses. So we have a whole range of how people use Litmaps, but many users, thousands of users, are just free users. They go to litmaps.com, they start searching for literature, and that's all there is to it. So our core feature that is really helpful for researchers is just search. So just searching for articles. There's perhaps many other ways you're already doing search, whether that's through Google Scholar or PubMed or many other databases, many other AI tools. So that might be very familiar to you, but that's our core offering. It's definitely helping you search for articles, doing this more efficiently and using special features that we're going to go over, as well as organizing your literature review, keeping track of papers, and finally sharing your work. And of course, as you can see on the right here, that's an example litmap. Visualizing your work is a part of how we do all of these things, whether that's searching, organizing, or sharing. Now, a really common question we get is, how is this different than other tools? Because today you might know there are like thousands of AI tools, and in this market of research tools, there are also very many. So you might compare it to many other tools that you think about, like something like ResearchRabbit, Connected Papers, FOSS-Viewer. There's a lot of tools out there. So what's the difference here? Each tool is certainly useful, and in general, it can be said that I think the more expert you are at any one tool, that's so much more valuable than knowing many tools a little bit. So certainly we don't expect you to drop every other tool, right? It's going to be part of your ecosystem of all the research tools you're using. But what sets Litmaps really apart is kind of the way you're conducting your search and the way you're maintaining your entire literature review process. And so when it comes to these different features, it's the only tool we're aware of today that does all of these at the same time. So some other tools might do one or two of these things, but we're trying to do all of them to manage your whole lit review a bit easier. So that starts with, how do you search for articles? And in Litmaps, you can really understand the algorithm super clearly. It's a very transparent algorithm, and you can change it. You can change what algorithm you're using, how you're using filters. It's a highly transparent system, as well as staying up to date. So we have an alert system that you can get automatic alerts for papers that are relevant to your topic, and you can visualize and annotate literature maps. So that's a very unique offering, which is to say, you might generally think of your research as this big list of references that you're using in your paper, but this can all be visualized. And when we visualize it, this becomes much easier to understand often our research from the top level perspective. How does Litmaps work? The core search method, so I'm going to be talking a lot about search today because that's the main thing we're going to be discussing when it comes to doing a literature review. But when it comes to searching for articles, how Litmaps works is actually using a slightly different method than what you might be familiar with in the past. So many databases you're using, so something like, again, the PubMed or Google Scholar, all these different databases, they're working in many different ways. But many of them, you're kind of typing in some keywords and you're seeing a list of papers come back. Now, this is also a part of Litmaps, but this is just one part. So we have a search lookup part of our tool where you can type in some keywords on your topic, you can look up a specific paper and see a list of papers. But where Litmaps really sits apart is using these papers as inputs to a more sophisticated search algorithm that actually uses the citation network. So instead of just looking at how similar this title is or the abstract is to what you're looking for, we also are looking at how papers are connected. So by using the connections like the citations and references of all of the papers you already know or that you've been gathering, we can find related literature. And I'll go over exactly what that algorithm looks like in a second. But as you can see here, this is just the idea that this is kind of the bigger citation network. There's millions of papers. They're all connected in different ways, but we kind of focus on the localized network of the papers you're looking at. So specifically, what does this mean? You'll see this in practice when I do the demo, and it'll be perhaps clearer. But for now, I still want to give you a great top-level understanding, because this is a really useful thing to know, is exactly how the algorithm works. So for a single paper, if we want to make a litmap for that paper, then how Litmaps works is it will use this paper, all of its references, all of its citations. So as a reminder, references are the papers that this paper is using. So in this paper at the bottom, the references section, all those articles, and its citations are all the articles in the future that are citing this work. So this is already a big list of papers. It could be hundreds or thousands. And additionally, co-citations. So co-citations are a little more complex to describe, but they're basically the citations of this paper's references. So it's basically another degree out of related literature that's relevant to this article, or could be potentially relevant, but it's not directly connected to it. And so anyways, using all these articles, Litmaps actually finds the top most interconnected articles. So you might have now 5,000 papers that are kind of related to your paper. And what we're looking at is how interconnected are they? And the result are the suggestions you see here, these hollow white dots. So the gray dot on this example is your, say, input paper, and the white dots are your suggestions. And this is what makes the algorithm super powerful, because you're going to see papers that are not just citations, not just references, but there's something more. They're the ones that are interconnected to everything else in your field. And that's why these maps give a good idea of like your research or this particular paper, how it sits in a field. And when you have many papers as inputs, you're getting an idea of what are all the articles I should be aware of on my topic. And the core difference here, as a side note for the more advanced users, the single input paper versus many input papers, we are not using co-citations for many input papers. But you can read more about our algorithms on our website, and I can share a link as well after the webinar in case you're curious to know all the details of exactly how they work. And we'll just quickly review also the data, because this is a really common question we get. And when it comes to any tool that's available today, often the first question researchers have is, like, what data is it using? And of course, how relevant is it to my topic? So our database has pretty comprehensive coverage, 170 million plus, and every week we are getting hundreds of thousands of new papers from our source databases. The main sources are Semantic Scholar, OpenAlex, and Crossref, with Semantic Scholar being the bulk of our corpus. And as you can see here, this is just a breakdown of our tool versus some of the other tools you might be familiar with today. And a lot of them are actually kind of similar, because a lot of them are using Semantic Scholar. So Semantic Scholar is a very highly used repository right now. However, we're also pulling in these other sources, which help us to have additional papers, helps us maybe to fill in metadata and so on. So that's why we are just rather getting a little bit more towards the top. But a lot of these are using also Semantic Scholar. So if you're using these other tools and you're happy with the results, you're going to actually see similar coverage with Litmaps, if not slightly more. And so coverage is slightly different than just quantity, because we could say, oh, look, we have almost 300 million papers. But if you're studying a very niche topic or niche field, you might wonder, is that really covered, or the humanities versus medicine? So at this point, we don't have, we have not yet done a thorough analysis of our database. Like, I cannot say, here's a pie chart of our coverage exactly as it is, because it's a very intensive process. And Litmaps is a very small team. There's just 4 full-time people here in Wellington, New Zealand. So because it's so small, what we can do is instead say, well, because our database is largely reliant on Semantic Scholar, we can look at how their coverage breaks down. And thankfully, this analysis has been done. This is a really excellent paper to please check out. It's looking at lots of different databases and what are their relative coverages. And it's relatively recent, which is excellent, because as time goes on, databases are always changing and getting updated. So here, according to this link, the Gusenbauer 2022, you can definitely check it out. It's actually second best, Semantic Scholar is, when it comes to relative subject coverage. So here is the list of all these databases, and these different colors each symbolize a different discipline. So medicine, sociology, engineering, and so on. And relative coverage is really good for us in this context because we want to actually cater to researchers of all backgrounds. So this indicates that it hopefully will have an adequate coverage, but the only way to know is, of course, to use the tool and to hopefully access perhaps your librarian resources, especially for those students here who are at universities. Your local librarian, your library's website will have really good information on how this coverage impacts you, your other database options, and so on. So, but as far as we can tell, we're happy with at least this result, that Semantic Scholar is doing pretty well when it comes to coverage. And the last thing I want to go over when it comes to Litmaps, just Litmap specific things, and then we'll dive finally into Lit Review, which hopefully many of you are here for. But with Litmaps as well, we can share research. And these are just really cool examples that I want to demonstrate of the different ways we can share work visually. So the first is simply this really neat way to embed maps. So here's an example website, the Civic Science Literature Maps. And they're trying to essentially compile nice libraries of information that other researchers in this field and science communicators can rely on. And so on their website, they actually have embedded a real Litmap. And this you can actually do even completely for free. This doesn't require our paid version or anything. So on any map, if you've created it, you curated this great list of papers, and you want to share it in a more interesting way, you can actually embed it, make it dynamic, and put it on your website or wherever you need to. And so clicking on the papers here, you're going to see real time, what are they, and all their information. Super useful. As well as public URLs. So same thing, you can do this on any map. Once you've curated your papers, or even perhaps you have a set of papers right now, you can visualize them and share them by public URL. It's really easy to do. And this we actually see sometimes even in publications. Now, of course, in a publication, you might have things change. So for example, this publication in 20 years, will this URL be accessible? It depends if this person keeps their map alive and so on. So what I would recommend for those in publishing, or if you want to save this map and something that wants to live a very long time, to use it in a figure. And this we actually see in quite a few papers, which is very cool, but you can include an image of your map wherever you are working in order to basically better reflect what is it you're talking about. If you're talking about how a field has evolved over time, you can clearly visualize this. And there's so many cool examples of how this is done. And again, all this can easily be done through the app. So just a heads up that it's not just about visualizing things for you to learn about research or about papers, but it also can be a really interesting way to share work with others. And finally, we often get questions about citing Litmaps. So we'll get requests that someone used Litmaps in their research and how should they cite it. So we just came up with a basic way to recommend that you can include Litmaps as a reference. So this is done from many other tools. And for example, people using ChatGPT, they often cite it something like this. So this is a great way to reference it and make clear not just the app you're using, but also the version is probably useful for future researchers wanting to go back and reproduce your work. So here I put the version by date. And again, those sharing things I talked about, the URL, the screenshots, and so on, they're great to add. And as well as if you want to discuss Litmaps, so many papers today, they actually talk about the Litmaps algorithm. That's an important part of any research paper, right, is discussing how I actually gathered this data and so on, or how I gathered my papers. So if you are going to talk about the algorithm, that's excellent. Please just do a quick search and see our latest. We basically are always maintaining our own documentation for exactly how Litmaps works. And so you're welcome to check that out in order to verify exactly what the current version is doing and the transparency there. So here's a brief overview of the literature review process, just so we know what are the key steps and how does Litmaps fit into that. And this is particularly focused on anyone here today who is you're starting out in research, or this might be the first or second literature review you're doing, and you want to review what is it really that I need to be doing here. So the first step is just defining the research question or topic. This might be something you're even given. So if this is like a classroom setting, maybe it's something assigned to you. But in the real world, this is a very difficult challenge all on its own. And it's actually a very common question that many students and researchers have is like, how do I even find this question or topic? So that's its own challenge. Second is to search for the literature. So say you're honing in on this topic, you're going to start looking for papers on it to understand what's the science behind this particular question. Every time I'm looking through papers, I want to also evaluate them. So we might search for something and you get 20,000 results. Now we need to evaluate those sources and actually understand which ones are worth reading, which ones do you need to know. From among these, you're going to prioritize them, right? You're going to be taking notes and you're going to be reading them. So this is actually, if anything, we often think of this as the grunt of the work. This is a huge amount of effort here is, of course, reading through everything. So all of these steps before, they're all challenging, but the reading is often the most time consuming. And staying organized. So you read some papers, you now want to kind of think now that you're learning, and then now you're going to take these learnings and actually translate them, right, synthesize them into some written text that you're going to come up with. So it's useful to know these disparate thoughts or these disparate papers, but now they need to kind of be coalesced into a story. So your literature review is often a story, right? It's a story of what's this topic, what's the work that's been done, what are the different methods. And so that organization is thinking of how do I categorize that? You know, maybe this is like, oh, past methods that use method A, past work that use method B, and so on. Writing, that's a natural next step. Eventually going to write this. For some of you, you might be doing a lit review for a couple weeks for a classroom assignment. For some, this might be a really comprehensive systematic review with thousands of papers that takes like a year to accomplish. So there's a huge variety of how you'll end up perhaps writing your results and sharing them. But that's, of course, a core step no matter who is doing the review. And of course, citing and referencing. So even as we're talking here, you can kind of tell that these are all important steps, but they're not steps like in the linear sense that 1 goes to 2 goes to 3. They're super intertwined and connected. So you're going to be jumping around all of these. Like maybe you got all the way to writing up your review and you realize, oh, this statement, I don't know what the answer is here. I need to go back and search for more literature. I need to understand more of my topic. So those are all going to be mixed together and a bit jumbled. And what are we going to talk about today? So in this webinar, you know, going over lit review, it's a very big topic. So we're going to focus on the steps here that Litmaps can help with and that we're trying to help make more efficient and make simpler, more straightforward with the tool. And that's these 4 key steps. So searching for literature, even evaluating your sources, staying organized, and even citing your work. So we're going to go over each of these and how do we do them in Litmaps. And we're also happy to answer questions about, what other things we can do with the tool. But for today, we're really focused on, accomplishing things in the lit review with Litmaps. So when it comes to using Litmaps for literature review, we kind of have these 3 core ideas that we want to discuss today, one at a time. So the first is simply, how do I start a literature review? This can be equally useful for a more novice researcher or even a more senior researcher if you're diving into a new topic. Of course, for professional researchers, you need to explore something for a client. So there's millions of times that we are starting a new literature review and starting it completely from scratch. And this is something we can try to do with Litmaps. The second is actually doing a comprehensive search. So again, I mentioned like systematic reviews or something where you want to make sure you actually cover this field really comprehensively. But a comprehensive search is also something you might want to do even for, say even a PhD thesis, right? You want to actually understand your field really well. You want to make sure you didn't miss any important articles on the topic and so on. That's doing a comprehensive search. Lastly, organizing and citing your review. So this is essential to just really get your work out the door. So these first 2 things, that's about really doing the work, getting your review. But if you're not organized and citing things, it's going to be really difficult to effectively communicate your results. And so we have some aspects of Litmaps that also help with this. So we'll start by diving into the very first step of starting a completely new literature review. And when we do this, we often see some of the same challenges, the same problems for basically everyone, and especially today. Like today, there's something like 2 million articles published every year. It's something insane. It's a huge amount. I mean, of course, the vast majority affect your work, but that doesn't mean that there isn't tons of stuff to go through. So we are all tending to be rather overwhelmed, especially, for the students here. If there's any undergrads, this can be really hard to start a brand new literature review and facing this mountain of work. There's information overload, there's way too much to read. And it's also very hard to sometimes see how does all this connect? Because what we have is basically thousands of papers sitting there. And even if I collect them all and I say, oh, look, there they are, how does it actually all fitting together into a cohesive story that I need to write about? And so with each of these, we're going to tackle them with Litmaps, kind of with as simple a solution as we can. So by being overwhelmed, we can try to address this by having a really clear search strategy. So it's okay that there's thousands of articles. That doesn't need to affect us because we can have a very clear idea of how am I going to start my search, like what are the key steps, and then from there, we can reiterate and keep discovering. For too much information, we want to try to spot the most important papers quickly, because there might be 20 really great papers on your topic to read, but they're not all perhaps essential to read. What we want to actually find is which ones are the most relevant to my topic and which ones are the most relevant for me to read right now. So if you're just starting a review, you probably want to read a more big picture paper, right? Or almost a review paper rather than some very niche case study. So this idea of prioritizing work and using visualizations to prioritize papers is a really great use case for Litmaps. And when it comes to connection, of course, because this is a visualization tool, this is something Litmaps does really well, is you can visualize all the work. So you can visualize not just new articles you're finding and how they fit in, but even. So here I am in Litmaps app. This is what you'll see when you set up a free account, basically. So most of the features and, or a good deal of the features and things we'll be talking about today are available in the free app. And then some of the more advanced things, like say all of the filters and really specific searching things, those are going to be on the pro version. So if you have any questions about the distinctions there, please feel free to ask. But essentially, going back to our very simple search strategy. So I'm just starting a literature review fresh for the first time. And so I'm going to jump over here to quick search and start finding some starting articles. That's what we call them. So we're going to start exploring related articles on a new Litmap. So as I mentioned before, this is kind of our main search console in terms of just looking through papers. So right now, when I search, I'm just using this example topic of the dolphin communication, how they communicate with signature whistles. I just type in these keywords, hit enter, and now I'm looking through the Litmaps database for all the most relevant literature. Now, this is not the end product. This is kind of the first step. And so when it comes to a simple strategy, really, I'm just saying, here's kind of the topic I think I'm doing, and what's the most relevant paper I see in my list here. You only need to pick one. In this case, I can see that there's many relevant articles. So this one is, 50 years of research on this topic. Here's another one about the same topic, and these are all super relevant. So I would go through each of these and click whichever one seems highly relevant. And if it's unclear, you can click on it and read its abstract in greater detail to get more context for what it's about. If not relevant, you just unclick it. Additionally, when I'm at this step, the priority is to consider how well connected are these articles to the rest of the literature. And we know this because we can see in a quick glance how many references and how many citations do each of these have. So because Litmaps is a citation network search algorithm, it's important that the articles I'm using to begin my literature review are well connected. Certainly, you're going to, in the end, want all the relevant articles. It doesn't matter if they even have, just a few citations. But for right now, because I'm starting from scratch, I'm just starting out on my topic, I want to really get like the nucleus, like the central point of my topic. So here are some great papers. They having hundreds of citations, 200, 100, 100 plus. So this is a great start. And from here, I just click Explore Related Articles. And using that top shared citations and references algorithm we discussed earlier, we're going to return the suggested most interconnected articles to those input articles I selected. So you can see in dark gray are my original 3 inputs. And all these hollow circles are the suggestions, which are the same as the ones in the sidebar here. So all of these are those white dots on the map. And at this step, so we had our topic, we found some starter articles, we made a map, but our main goal here when we're starting literature review from scratch is just to start finding the most relevant papers on our topic and just to start getting a grasp on our field. So looking at the map, we can use the visualization here to actually understand, which paper should I be reading first. So the axes by default are sorted by date and citation count. That means when we're going from left to right or increasing the x-axis, that we're actually seeing things that are getting published more and more recently. So here on the far right, there's a 2019 publication, and on the far left, it's a 1994. And citation count is going from bottom to top. So here at the top, if I click this paper, it has 370 citations, and if I go way to the bottom, it has 0. And naturally, almost all maps are going to end up a little bit on this diagonal path because generally, the earlier the work is, and especially because here we're focusing on connections, you're going to see earlier works with many, many citations. There tend to be perhaps more, salient or important works in the field because they had a high impact, they have many citations. And then as we go towards the right, the papers are getting newer, so naturally they're going to have less citations. They simply haven't had time to be cited. And if something's published in 2024, it has literally no opportunity to be cited. It's brand new. So this is a natural phenomenon we see with almost all litmaps, this kind of diagonal layout. But when it comes to prioritizing, so already here I have some 20 article suggestions. If I want to use the map to make things faster, then what I can do is focus in on the top left, because here we know that these things have been more highly cited, and they're kind of more, you could say, in a sense, perhaps historic papers in the field, depending on how old they are. So for example, that 1994 paper, 150 citations, or this 2006 paper, 370 citations, they're clearly they made some good impact. They're a bit older, right? This is already some 20 years old, wow. And they're a great place to start if I want to maybe get a high level understanding of my field. And so if I click here, I can read the title, I can see that the abstract is relevant. And if it looks relevant, I can go ahead and click on the actual title, which takes me to the source page. If I find this article relevant, then I also don't want to lose track of it. And here's where Litmaps becomes also really dynamic and easy to work with in the way that we can click more like this, and it adds the article to our map. And this kind of it impacts it in two ways. So one way is that now it's just saved. So even if I leave the website, I close my computer, it will still be here. All of these gray articles are saved. And if I click on articles at the top right, I can always access what are the real articles saved to my map. But the other impact is that now I can rerun my search with this paper as an additional input. That's why this yellow box popped up. And so at the beginning of your search, this might not be so essential. You are kind of slowly honing in on your topic. We have plenty of suggestions. Nonetheless, it's very useful because the more articles you've collected on your topic, that means the more focused the actual suggestions can be. And again, it really helps us to read whatsoever is most important because we're focusing on our topic more severely. So in this case, I can go ahead and click load more results. And now the algorithm is using all 4 of these as an input instead of just those original 3. And so that's kind of my recommendation for just a getting started strategy with Litmaps if you're diving to a new lit review or if you're starting one relatively from scratch. You can even repeat this process for papers So perhaps you got a paper from an advisor or colleague. You can use that paper here as well. You don't have to search by keyword. It's really whatever is useful for you. And then getting here, looking through these suggestions on the map, using the visualization to some degree to prioritize things. And then as well as looking on the left-hand side. So that can also be a really easy way to just quickly browse through what are the suggestions here and reviewing them in greater detail whenever you find something more relevant. Clicking more like this to add it to the map and start curating your list. So you are not just finding things that are relevant, but you're immediately saving it and curating it to target your search even better. And there's just a couple more things I wanted to demonstrate on this stage as well. So in the PowerPoint, we mentioned, it can be hard to get a top level understanding of your field. So when you're entering the field for the first time, how does it all connect? This question is something that many researchers, especially students, often have. And so in this case, we can see right now, I'll just load this so we can get rid of that. We can already see in this context how these papers are connecting to one another. However, we might be wondering, does this really tell us the top level perspective? Because it's telling us how these existing papers connect to one another, but it's also giving us these suggestions of other work in the field. So by reviewing all of these and understanding what are the general topics here, what is going on, we can start to piece together how different subtopics connect. And to make that a little clearer, we can actually start labeling these with different tags. So this one, for example, great. It's on the cabs appear to model the whistles of community members. So perhaps this is on cab specific. And this one, yeah, something about learning abilities. So if I continue to do this, as I continue my search and I continue to save papers and annotate them, then slowly this map will evolve to have a really clear picture of like which articles are interconnected and which topics are interconnected. Additionally, another great way to get this top level perspective, right now I'm doing it for a collection of articles, and that might be a bit overwhelming, especially if you're still new to this topic and there's a lot going on. So at any point, you can also kind of take a step back, and if I find, say, one of these suggested articles looks really great, instead of can add it to the map, but what I can also do is actually view it independently. So here I can click, here's the paper information. I just click on the 3-dot option and click Explore on a new Litmap. And now I can get a whole new picture of the research by looking at just this article as an input. So there's a lot of ways to basically analyze the work in the field, but our goal here is either to be finding articles, finding relevant literature, but also to getting that understanding of the research field and how do each of these papers contribute to that and contribute to my topic. Here we'll now talk about the comprehensive search. So we have already kind of gone over how do I start literature review and dive into the topic. Now we're going to go over how do I make sure I didn't miss anything? How do I make sure I'm doing a really well-rounded search on my topic? So with this, it has its own set of challenges and issues that many researchers face. So you might be going through literally thousands of papers that could be potentially relevant. You can be unsure if you missed something. That's a really common question we get, or in general for literature review strategy, like how do I know if I'm done with my review? As well as getting out of date. So like staying up to date automatically from the time you collect all your literature to the time you say perhaps publish your paper, might be weeks or months or something like that, right? Because you're also doing analysis and so on. So if during that time something comes out, how do you know? It's a lot of work to keep rerunning all of your searches, and there's really easy automated methods you can use instead. For missing something, we're just going to go over searching on your existing library. It's a really great way to just see, did I miss anything from the papers I already know? And for going through thousands of papers, we're going to try to reduce that. You don't need to go through thousands of papers in some situations. Instead, we can really hone in on a more niche and subtopics by using filters and the other algorithms we want to go over. And for getting out of date, we have a really simple automated alert system that you can just set up with like a single button. And that way, if there's any relevant articles on your topic that are going to be connected to your work, you just get emailed. It's much easier than trying to rerun the things over and over. We are back here in Litmaps, and we're going to go over comprehensive searching. So for this example, I'm going to start, I'm just going to hop over to a different workspace. So here as an example, I have my kind of user at the top, and then here on the right are workspaces. This is a great way to divide up projects if you have, say, you're managing different research projects, different literature reviews. So here I'm going to pop over to a different project where I've already uploaded a big set of papers. So you can imagine that on this topic, I have already really began researching in earnest and have gathered a lot of literature. And I can even show you how I would input these articles. So if you're using the Litmaps app, you'll curate this through the app. So eventually, by tagging and managing your map, you will create such a big list. But if you are an existing researcher, you've already curated this somewhere else, you might have it saved in, say, your Zotero, Mendeley, any reference manager, EndNote, or you just have a set of CSV of papers, or for wherever your papers are coming from, we can just drop those into here. So when it comes to trying to bring a file in, I can again click Quick Search. And here I can use the import feature. So when I import, I can use BibTeX, RES, or PubMed, or do a manual import using all these different values. So you can see even like PubMed IDs, things like that. And so here I can show you an example of dropping in. Great. So here I have a file. It found the 51 articles matching there, and actually even says I had some duplicates. Oops. So here, otherwise, I have all my articles, and I can just click explore related articles for this BibTeX that I brought in. And so the result of doing the comprehensive search, so making sure if I missed anything, the simple solution is that it's just inherent in the system of searching. So because I'm using all of these articles as an input, the articles I get back are the articles I'm missing. However, of course, if you go through these, you might find, oh, well, this actually isn't so relevant to my topic. I don't mind that I missed that. And our goal with Litmaps is to make sure that you're getting the articles that are indeed most relevant. And as you can see, when I hover over these suggestions, all these blue lines indicate their connections. So because this article has so interconnected to my input articles, as well as to the other suggestions, it's likely going to be really relevant. And actually, perhaps I want to have read that. Even though this one, you can see it's actually a very old 1965 article, but still might be very relevant. And this is where comprehensive searching gets more precise, because we can do this process a lot and find many, many suggestions on the right. But what you might be interested in is not just all the literature on my topic, right? Oftentimes we want to really start focusing in and doing it as fast as possible to not get overwhelmed. And so this is where the different filters come in. So here, for example, I might want to focus on, hey, I did this review. You can imagine I did it like a couple months ago, and now I want to check, is there just anything that came out on my topic? So I can do something like 2023 or 2024. I mean, if I do 2024, let's see what happens. And so now I'm just finding what's the latest work on my field. So it's still going to be based on connections, but it's going to be only returning papers published since 2024. And here I'm seeing some all new papers on the topic. So similarly, we can repeat this process with different keywords. So the idea of focusing and targeting your research. So even if you're early on in your literature review, you don't need to have hundreds of papers to do this, but you can already start targeting in. So for example, in this domain, there's sometimes a whole different research field when it comes to like how do the offspring and their parents communicate using whistles, because this is still in the dolphin communication example. So if I add this keyword, it's going to now limit my results to articles that have this keyword in their titles or abstracts. So only titles and abstracts. Nonetheless, it's very useful to just at least start funneling and focusing our results on some different subtopic. And lastly, we can also focus on specific authors or even specific journals. Lastly here, the other example I wanted to show you, particularly for, say, researchers that you already have your articles saved in different reference managers and managing that process. We're going to go over organizing and sharing in the next section. But for now, I can also demonstrate how I would kind of automatically save papers I find to my Zotero collection, because this is one cool integration we recently came out with, is that if you're using Zotero, so that's a reference manager, that's a system of keeping track of all of your articles. So you can do this in Litmaps to some degree, but many people, especially the more senior academics, you might already have different systems for managing papers, and even students today are using Zotero because it's free. But if you already are having a Zotero account, you can click on this little Z logo here on the left of the app and basically synchronize your accounts. So here I already have a couple of accounts set up, and these will just going to be automatically going back and forth up to date with whatever you have in Zotero and whatever you have in Litmaps. It's very useful. So for this example, I pulled this set of articles from Zotero, and one of the cool takeaways is that now when I'm discovering things using the app, if I save it, so for example, this recommendation here, and I just click tag, I tag it here, it will automatically sync to my Zotero collection. So let me just pull up my Zotero library to give you a demonstration of that. So here I'm just adding this interesting looking paper, The Primate Origins of Human Social Cognition. Okay, so here, as you can see, this is the Zotero library. So we have all of our different collections here. and primate cognition is the collection I'm trying to sync to. And so what I can also do is at the top right here, it often syncs automatically, but I can use this sync button to ensure, because it said in here in the Zotero app, it last synced 1 hour ago. So I can rerun this sync and double check for the new article I dropped in. So it was the primate origins of human social cognition, and that's right here. So it makes the whole process of essentially, we have existing literature, we want to find new articles, but sometimes combining these things can be really tedious. So we often have to export, import, manage citations. So the beauty is that if you're already using Zotero to manage your papers and you want to explore more articles in Litmaps, it's really easy to now just get these new papers and sync them up. So this way your research is never getting like out of sync with different libraries in different places. This essentially is the core factors when it comes to doing comprehensive searching. The next thing we'll go over, and the final thing where we can give everyone a break and do questions and so on, is simply staying organized and citing your review. You're citing your different papers. When it comes to organizing and citing, I don't have specific problems to go over, but rather the different ways the app can help you do this. If we were going to discuss different challenges and problems, just taking a step back, you've done all this research, you're finding all these papers, but like actually saving them and coalescing them and managing the writing process can end up being very challenging. So, for example, you might be searching for papers and then you realize you missed something and you need to sync it up again. So there's a lot of steps here. And so this is where Litmaps also tries to help, because if you can manage all of your literature using tags, using maps, then it's going to make it much easier to just expand that collection, to see more papers, to pull those out again. We have what we call design mode, and this is what lets you really edit your literature review and visualize it and kind of bring it to life. And so let me pull up this example map in the app. Okay, so here's a different workspace again that I have, a different project. And in this project, I have already kind of coalesced or compiled an example set of papers. So this is still not necessarily comprehensive, but it's an example set of articles and they're different categories. So here on the far left, you can see all the tags I've been using. So these are what we would think of as maybe subtopics or niche topics on my greater idea here, which in this example is actually about microplastics and marine life. And each of these tags has a different color. And now here in the map, I can kind of see what how these colors are lumped together and how they connect to the rest of the literature. And depending on your research, this visualization might give you different stories or different ideas to talk about. And if I click on, so I'm here on my map homepage. And so maybe just taking a step back, how do I get here? I was on my Litmaps home screen. And if you're on the home screen, you're going to see all the maps you've ever made. And if I click on this map here and I click on open design, then I can actually start to even edit this page a bit. So that's how I added things like this title here, is by clicking the text at the top and dropping in some information here. And when it comes to sharing, this is also the place that we are going to start sharing our map from. So at the top right, we can click share. And this one is already actually shared with a public URL. So this is kind of a fun thing. If I drop it into the chat, you can play around with that and see that you will have equal access to this map. You can click on it, you can see the different articles. Of course, when you change it or you can save it to your local account, it won't affect my map. So if we actually want to genuinely share a map together and work on it together, then you're going to want to use a Litmaps team. But otherwise, this is a great way just to share your work. And I can also share by email address if I want to give it to just specific people. And that link will be live as long as this map is alive and as long as you have this enabled. Now, when it comes to citations, so we kind of saw that automatic Zotero sync method. That was really useful, but perhaps you are not using Zotero and you don't want to, or you just have some other way you want to keep track of papers, you want to save them and pull them down. To do any of that, for the map, we just click on articles at the top right, can select as many as we want, and use this little download icon to pull them out. And so here you can export articles as a BibTeX, CSV, RIS, all the same formats that we accept import, you can do export. Additionally, if you want to kind of keep your keep the consistency of the categories you already made, you can export as well within the tags. So if I click on one of these tags, I can do the same exporting option here. And finally, another step is often during the review process, like we've collected some beginning papers, we've done our review, we started taking notes. And like I said, the review process is messy. You might end up going back in time and saying, oh no, I forgot about this one particular topic, particular idea. And so when that happens and we say we're doing an explore and we're finding new papers, now you have this new paper and you've added it here. You want to have a really simple way to just also drop this paper citation into your published work. So for any paper in the app, we can do that by just clicking on that articles options at the top right and clicking export. And this is an easier way to just get this single article's citation information to drop into, say, our existing work. So this is something you might use in the later stage of your research process. So when you're finally writing things up and you're finding papers, like different random papers, and you're wanting to include them, that's a great way to just export a single one. And finally, just for the last couple minutes here before we dive into your questions and hear all the great ideas everyone has to share, I just wanted to go over some top-level Litmaps access information. So just so you're aware, this is a great opportunity just to know what are your actual options when it comes to using the app, and some really cool opportunities that are coming up, other webinars and resources. So like I mentioned, it's a freemium tool. Everyone can use Litmaps for free. You have a couple free maps. You can search up to a certain number of articles. This version works great. This is definitely what you want to start with, just to explore the app and see how useful it is for your research. If you want to use more of the advanced things we talked about today, so particularly the filters and the Zotero sync, if these seem really, really useful for your research, then this is something you can play around with on the Pro version. And of course, Teams is more for collaboration. So if you and your whole research lab want to work together, researcher or advisor and student, perhaps other context, classroom settings. So there's different ways and reasons you would use a team. Definitely you can do this as well, and you can sign up for all those in the app. And we often get asked, well, how much does it actually cost? So in the app, we have something called country parity pricing. So here, if I click on the upgrade to Litmaps at the bottom left, you'll see like a little dialogue with the pricing. But the pricing varies also based on your country. So the best way to always know how much does it cost is just to go to the checkout screen, and you'll see your price and your discount rate based on what country you're located in. So across all the different countries, there's different pay parities, and this is why we're doing this special kind of cost method. But the default price, you can kind of see it here for, say, someone in the United States, is like $10 US a month. But for today, if you were really taken and you using the Litmaps free version, you're thinking you want to upgrade, then please try to do it before October 20th and use webinar 30. This is an awesome little thank you just for coming to the webinar, learning about the tool. So please go ahead and use this if you are going to sign up before October 20th, and you'll get 30% off if it's the first time you're signing up for Litmaps. And after all we've gone over, you might still have a lot of questions, and we're definitely going to dive into some right now. But because literature review is such a huge topic, like there's a lot of aspects to it, a lot of steps, and a lot of ways to even do it, I actually will also recommend attending another webinar that's really focused on a more top-level comprehensive strategy of how to do a literature review. So this is through someone we often partner with called, the brand is Effortless Academic, and the person's Ilya Shabanov. So a lot of you might already know this person, but he is doing a lot of great webinars and courses and providing information and a lot of free information about how to enhance research process, especially making better notes, academic note-taking, and so on. So here's an upcoming webinar. I can't recall when October 26th is, but definitely next week or two. And this is kind of the overview of the strategy he will be going over. So as you can see, Litmaps is just one part of this strategy. If you're really wanting to think about literature review from a very big top-level perspective and all the different steps required, especially if you're really new to research or you're wanting to really up your use of different tools and optimizing your workflow, that can be a really cool thing to check out. And we're running a really fun collaboration with him. So if you are interested in signing up for Litmaps annual subscription, so for a whole year, then you can get a completely free ticket to the webinar. And all you need to do is just go into the app, click the upgrade button and use annual, and you will see a little checkbox allowing you to say, yeah, I want to attend this webinar for free. And that's all you have to do. Otherwise, definitely you can check it out independently as well and see if you want to attend. And the last thing I really wanted to share is another resource we have, and this one is focused more on teachers. So some of you here might be professors with your students, your advisors, helping your own mentees and students, or you might be someone in the classroom setting teaching research methods or seminars and so on. So for all these different contexts, you know, teaching literature review certainly perhaps has its own challenges, and it likely has a lot of those same problems that we kind of discussed when it comes to doing a literature review. So all these typical issues that students are struggling with, like not just finding literature, but especially that understanding the big picture kind of stuff. And so that's why we came up with this class that's essentially a Mastering Literature Review with Litmaps course, but it's really designed not a course, say, for a student to hop on and take right now, but rather as course materials for an instructor to use in order to teach literature review using Litmaps. So if you're thinking, oh, this tool looks really great as a teaching aid, then definitely check out this course. It's on our website. If you go to litmaps.com and you look at Teach with Litmaps in the About section, you'll find a bunch of lecture slides and a course outline, like assignments and grading and so on. So definitely check it out if that seems relevant to you. Okay, thank you so much for everyone's patience. Now I can dive into the questions part of the webinar and go over, all these different ideas here. We have a lot in the chat. So there's some questions about how do we compare Litmaps with ResearchRabbit from Usman. So thanks for that. That's a really common question. So I did discuss kind of our tool versus other tools in general. Let me just go back to this. So here's a breakdown. One of these columns is ResearchRabbit. I just obfuscated it for right now. So these tools are just different. ResearchRabbit is also an excellent tool. So there's a few differences. The core one I can think of, I'm pretty sure that you might have to just explore the tools as well to ensure I'm mentioning the correct features. But for example, this last one, visualizing and annotating literature maps. So all of this is really Litmap specific. I don't know any tool, including ResearchRabbit, that does this right now. So if you're just there to search for papers, if you're very interested in searching by authors, that might be something more ResearchRabbit-y, versus if you want to see this particular set of features. So if you want to be able to visualize big sets of your own papers, to annotate them, to also reorder axes. So everything visualization-wise is very Litmaps specific. Litmaps is also the only tool that has a custom-built visualization engine. So that's why our visualizations tend to look rather different. And as well as targeting results with filters, I think other apps also have different filters. So right now we are having 4 different filters you can look by, like journal, author, keywords, and dates. So yeah, I think it comes down again to the same answer of saying like this variety of features is in one place. So if that's really useful for you and you want to hopefully manage your whole literature review process a little more efficiently and targeted, this might be a good fit. Again, if you're just there for search, then both tools are doing this similarly. Okay, and I'll just take 2 more here. These are all great questions. Thank you so much, guys. So one is, can you mention again how we differentiate references from citations? That's a really also very useful question. So I can use this paper as an example here. So take this paper, it's circled in red. So we say I published this article in 2020. And when I wrote this article, within it, I needed to use previous research, right? So I might write, this idea happened, and it happened by this paper published in 1992. That paper is now a reference to my paper. It's something I'm using, I'm referring to it. So here's my red paper, and all my references happen in the past. So in this little visualization, you always imagine as the x-axis is kind of date. And so in the past of that, all of these would be references. And then if I'm thinking, hey, actually, sorry, all the ones that are connected by actual lines would be references in this case. And then if I'm thinking in the future, so I published this paper in 2020 again, and any paper that came out after this that uses my work, so say my work made a cool contribution and future work is now referencing my work, so I'm a reference in their papers, those papers are now my citations. And so especially for the students here, people that are entering research for the first time, you might already know or start to gain an understanding that citations are very important. So the more well-cited an article is, that means many people are using this work. And citations themselves have a huge impact across all of research and academia. So citations impact, say, everything from like how well ranked a journal is. So different journals, you might say, oh, they have different prestige. This prestige is largely based on citations because it represents how much is this research being used and acknowledged, as well as other things. So even within the academic systems, how academics are rewarded is sometimes correlated to citations. So there's many different. It's a very big and important concept, and so yeah, it's references kind of always think in the past, citations think in the future, and that's how we always are talking about it when we're in the Litmaps universe. Selena asks, how do I perform a good search in Litmaps? That's an interesting question. So I would say with any search, the core goal is making it as specific as possible. So with Litmaps, the whole idea is if you already have an article in mind or you find these starting articles, making sure these articles have good connections, so they have a good amount of citations and references, i.e. they're well connected to the network. That's, I would say, step one. And then step two is you already have these given suggestions, so that's already a great search. But what you can do to make it even better is targeting it, because in general, the problem today is not like, oh, I can't find anything on my topic. The problem most of the time, often, is there's way too much. There's way too much on my topic, and it's not on my particular little niche that I'm working on. So this is where drilling down and using these different filters makes a big difference. Great question about how can I use Litmaps with other tools, something like Elicit. I mean, there's a laundry list of tools here we can include. Certainly for this, I definitely recommend that Effortless Academic webinar and other webinars like it that are going over not just this tool alone, but like a much bigger picture strategy about the whole review process and how does that fit in. As papers start to show up and as we find new keywords on the same topic, how do we merge or combine all of our Litmaps searches? Really cool idea, Roberto. I would say the best way, I could give you a quick demo, but I'll just explain it perhaps instead to save some time. But if you're having many Litmaps on your app, so say you have Litmap on this topic and so on, and you have different tags, you can actually create new maps using compiling many different tags. And you can move papers between maps and tags pretty easily. So in this case, what I would recommend is like if you've been managing your research with tags, you can just create a new map. And in the new map section, you can also say like, getting the papers from Litmaps, and then you just drop in all of your tags, and you can combine very easily in this way. So using many tags, or accessing your maps and dropping those articles one by one into other maps. Leonard is asking, is it compulsory to include the seed paper in your research? The idea of the seed paper is not a compulsory thing. It's more like a way to get started. So it's a way to say like, hey, if I'm totally new to this topic and I'm just looking, I don't even know where to start, then my recommended strategy is to look up keywords on my topic and just find one good starting paper, because that's all you need, but that's a minimum. You can also select multiple. And then from there, we're building our Litmap search. We're building our Litmap. Matthew, is asking, how do we delete tags? So when it comes to deleting a tag, I pick one that's empty, hopefully. So this tag here, I just click on the 3-button option at the top right and click delete. And before I delete it, I just show you also that there's a lot of other fun tag options we didn't have time for today that I really love. So you can change the colors. There's a lot of visualization play. You can change the name here. And you can also explore directly from tags, adding articles to them. So there's a huge amount of curation you can do on your tags page. And for Boolean search terms and keywords by Jimmy, great question. So for that, I'll just give you a little demo. So if I click on with keywords, yes, you can do several things here. And here's a great informational tidbit. If I click advanced search operators, I can do including the next term, excluding the next term. So all these kinds of basic operators when it comes to doing keyword searching, we have available here. So one person is asking, as a PhD candidate wanting to explore new topics, could you please touch on how Litmaps can help identify and create new research gaps? So research gaps is a really great It's this whole other area of how I would use Litmaps to go about finding research gaps. And so what I would recommend here is actually to go to our YouTube channel. So if you go to Litmaps YouTube, there's a whole video, I think it's like 10 minutes on finding research gaps. And there's basically a few core ways I recommended. Are all the documents found in Litmaps articles, or maybe not all of them? So I think this is asking, like, if I click on this article, will I always be taken to the source page? If this is what the question is asking, and the answer for that would be not necessarily. Well, in a sense, yes, almost all papers, you'll have a link here and you can click on it and go to the source page, but your access to this article will be determined by your personal access like abilities. So if you're a student at a university, you often have different publisher access, like you'll be able to access many more papers. For independent researchers, it's often challenging, and in that case, we actually have released a new feature here. So if you see this little orange icon, this little open access icon on a paper, that means you can see the paper. You can actually have access to it because it's an OA paper. Otherwise, you might still be able to see it, but because it's not an OA paper, that's something that's going to be determined by like your own access abilities, which is something outside the scope of Litmaps. It's not something we can help with, unfortunately. Thanks again for attending, for sharing your really great questions and comments. It really helps us to get a better idea of how you're using the tool and what you're looking for. And please don't hesitate to write to us with additional questions and feedback. We are like a rapidly growing tool. So what you're doing and how you're using the tool will actually have a huge impact in what we build. That's why we built the Zotero Sync, is because people asked for it and they felt it was really useful. So we're trying to be as responsive as possible. But anyways, thank you all so much for attending. Look for the post-webinar email. And yeah, we'll hopefully see you next time at future events, and hopefully even at the Effortless webinar. Thank you all so much.